I've never been superstitious, but the gig at the subterranean shelter almost turned me into a believer. I fell into the job really, one of my less unsuccessful ventures on the tail end of a slew of temporary positions. The lowdown was simple: inhabit the shelter, follow the rules, maintain the place, and most importantly, make sure it remained ready for potential, undisclosed emergencies. The pay was decent. The isolation catered to my ever-growing distaste for corporate banter. And the silence down there was a kind of company I found I didn't mind. The shelter wasn't your Hollywood bunker. It was more like a well-furnished basement under steroids, comforts of a cozy studio apartment, walls lined with shelves of non-perishable foods, first aid kits galore, and technology that probably knew more about me than my own mother. I spent the days reading, tinkering with random gadgets, and checking system statuses, the epitome of living by the adage, mind your own business. Write about the rules. They came in a small, leather-bound book that looked ridiculously pretentious. Most were what you'd expect: keep the shelter sealed, perform daily system checks, report anything unusual. But one caught my eye the first day, so bizarre in its simplicity, it almost made me laugh. Do not engage in conversation from midnight to 4 a.m. I chuckled, imagining some introverted rule maker's fantasy to ensure complete quiet hours. Then came the instances I told myself were not odd, labeling them quirks of subterranean life. It started with the timing. My watch started to run slow, losing minutes that accumulated into hours, though the shelter's digital clock never wavered. I'd set my wristwatch in the morning, only to find it lagging behind after a few hours. The air was another thing. Some nights, it felt heavier, laden with a dank metallic tang that no amount of air filtration checks could explain away. I noted these in the log, half expecting someone in a suit to show up and congratulate me for my observational skills. This particular night was like any other, until it was. I had poured myself a coffee, the rich bitterness of familiar comfort, when the lights seemed to flicker. Not the dramatic flicker of horror films, but like someone was playing with a dimmer switch, lowering and then raising the lights so slightly you'd think your mind was playing tricks. "It's probably nothing," I muttered, a statement more for the silent walls than for my sanity. Or so I thought. Looking for a diversion, I turned to my hobby of dismantling things and decided the old radio on the shelf was tonight's victim. As I unscrewed the back, the unmistakable click of the shelter door echoed through the room. Freezing, screwdriver in midair, I listened. Silence followed, as thick as the darkness outside the shelter's confines. Chiding myself for the jumpiness, I returned to the radio, pulling out its guts. The digital clock on the wall loudly displaying 11:57 p.m., almost quiet hour. I smiled ruefully, wondering if talking to myself counted against the rules. "What is it tonight, huh? Ghosts or gremlins?" I whispered to the shelter, feeling the weight of the walls around me tighten just a little. That was when I heard it, a soft scraping, like chair legs on concrete. It was coming from the far corner of the shelter, where shadows lay thickest. "Funny," I said, voice barely a breath, my gaze fixed on the blackness. "Very funny." But no one laughed back. The scraping stopped abruptly, as if caught in the act. I held the screwdriver like a pathetic excuse for a weapon, my heart thumping a frantic Morse code against my ribcage. It was 12:01 a.m. The shelter rulebook, sitting pristinely on the shelf, seemed to stare at me, its gold lettering glinting slightly under the uncertain lights. I remembered the rule, the laughable one: no talking past midnight. As my breath caught in my throat, I wondered, perhaps for the first time, what or who I wasn't supposed to talk to. The rulebook's presence, so clean and untouched compared to the dusty shelves surrounding it, pushed a chill down my spine. I glanced at my cheap digital watch. It blinked back 11:57 p.m. Rain battered the small basement window, drumming a relentless, almost mocking rhythm. I wet my lips, considered breaking the silence with a scoff at my own growing superstition. But then the clock clicked to 11:58, and I felt the air thicken with my hesitation. Turning away from the rulebook, I tried focusing on other things, the peeling wallpaper, the musty scent of old books and older secrets. But it was like the darkness around me was shrinking, condensing into something tangible. It felt as though the shadows in the corners of the room were deepening, becoming denser, almost watchful. 11:59 p.m. My heart pounded painfully against my ribcage. The wind howled louder, a banshee screaming in the storm. I cursed under my breath for being spooked by a simple power outage and a stupid roll. But then again, who writes no talking past midnight in a shelter rulebook unless there's a damn good reason? Midnight. The digital clock's numbers switched, and as they did, a hush fell over everything. The storm seemed to hold its breath, and even the draft sneaking through the cracks stopped whistling. Silence wasn't just an absence of noise, it felt like a presence, a mass around me, heavy and oppressive. Then, from the darkest corner of the room, a whisper. It was so faint, so soft, I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. But it came again, a harsh hiss of breath that formed my name, Ella. Frozen to the spot, my eyes darted around, searching for any logical explanation. A prank, I thought desperately, a cruel, elaborate joke. Someone hiding in the cellar with me, tucked away behind the looming stacks of canned goods perhaps. Yet I knew the shelter's schedule, nobody was supposed to be here but me. Ella, it sighed again, longer, more insistent. The sound made my skin crawl. I clenched my fists, nails digging into the palm, but no amount of self-inflicted pain could anchor me back to the sense of reality that was rapidly unraveling. I thought to yell out, demand who was there, but the rule flickered through my terrified mind. No talking past midnight. Was this the reason why? Fear clawed at me, urging me to break the rule, to shout, to do anything to make this whispered nightmare end. Ella, why are you afraid? The voice was clearer now, still quiet, but unmistakably real and horribly close. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, convinced that staying silent was my only defense. I stepped back slowly, and my foot knocked into something. A clang echoed in the silent room as a can rolled across the floor. The noise seemed enormous, a gunshot in the silence, and it was all the impetus needed. The temperature in the room dropped. I could see my breath misting in the air in front of me as I exhaled sharply. My back hit the wall, no more room to retreat. The voice chuckled, a dry, rasping sound, and then it spoke again, louder now, almost casual. Why the rule, Ella? Don't you want to talk with me? My chest heaved as I tried to control my breathing, my mind racing but getting nowhere. The shadows seemed to listen, leaning in, my panic their sustenance. Then the whisper came right by my ear, so close I felt the tickle of it against my skin. They said you wanted to know what happened to the old caretaker. I can show you, Ella. I can tell you everything. A matchstick of curiosity flared up in my terror-shadowed thoughts. The old caretaker had vanished, months ago, just another unsolved puzzle of the shelter. Part of me, foolish or desperate, longed to ask, to know. Yet, the rule loomed in my consciousness. No talking past midnight. The fear won. I shoved the curiosity down, pressed my lips together till it felt like they'd fuse. But outside, the storm broke anew. Thunder crashed, a booming exclamation point that seemed to shake the very earth, and my resolve with it. I gasped, and the shadow whispered eagerly, "Yes, Ella." A sound from the window, a frantic scratching. I jumped, heart thudding painfully. My eyes shot to the small, grimy glass pane. There, pressed against it, was the pale, desperate face of the old caretaker, eyes wide with unspeakable fear. My breath caught in my throat as strains of a low whimpering followed his gaze, seeping through the thin pane. The caretaker's face distorted with each shudder, cheeks quivering as if every nerve in his body screamed to flee. Yet there he was, anchored to the ground, his eyes fixed on me. I approached the window tentatively, each step reluctant, as if the floorboards themselves whispered warnings beneath my feet. The wind outside moaned a lonesome cry, mingling with the caretaker's soft whimpers. My hand trembled as I reached for the window latch. The metal was ice cold, biting into my flesh, reinforcing the dread that surged through my veins. "Why, what are you doing outside?" My voice hardly rose above a whisper, muffled by the thick air of the room. "Go back," he mouthed silently. Terror etched deeper into his wrinkles with each word he failed to speak aloud. I paused, my fingers still clutching the latch. The caretaker's eyes darted frantically from side to side, as though tracking invisible horrors that slithered in the darkness beyond the house. His next words came as a hiss, barely audible over the wind's wail. "It's not safe." The glass between us fogged with his breath, each exhale a ghostly smudge erasing the boundaries between him and the looming shadows. I drew back slightly, the window still closed, the frail barrier between the known and the lurking unknown. In the dim light, his pale face seemed to fade in and out of visibility, as though he was part of some ghastly apparition, a warning from a realm that logic dared not tread. His gaze locked onto something behind me. Instantly, a prickling sensat. Iron crawls up my spine. I resisted the urge to look back, fearing what might manifest from the dark corridors of my own home. The house, always a place of warmth and familiarity, now felt like a stage for some morbid play, each room potentially hiding specters just out of sight. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to maintain eye contact with the caretaker. "What is it? What's out there?" Before he could respond, a crash echoed from the back of the house, the sound of shattering glass. My heart skipped as terror gripped me tighter, my instincts screaming at me to run, to hide. Yet my feet were glued to the floor, my body unwilling to leave the caretaker alone with whatever horrors were amassing outside. The caretaker's face blurred through the tears that had begun to form, his mouth agape in a silent scream. He pounded weakly against the glass. His earlier resignation turned to desperate, animalistic fear. Without thinking, I flung the window open. The cold blast of the night air hit me like a wave, but it was the stench that made me gag, the rotting, earthy smell of decay. The caretaker stumbled forward, half falling through the window into my arms. His body was ice cold, his clothes damp with dew or something far worse. "We need to seal it before they come in," he gasped, pulling me away from the window. Who's coming?" My voice was a mixture of fear and frustration, echoing slightly in the cramped space as we retreated. He didn't answer, only shook his head with a mournful certainty that chilled me more deeply than the autumn air. We moved back into the main hallway, his steps faltering, each movement a testament to his utter exhaustion or terror. That's when we heard it, a low, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the ground outside. It was coming from the direction of the broken window at the back of the house. The caretaker and I exchanged a look that conveyed a mutual understanding. Whatever was out, there was now making its way inside. The house creaked ominously around us, as if it too braced for the unseen intruder's approach. I struggled to breathe, the air thick as if the darkness itself had soaked up every bit of life. We were trapped in my own home, hunted by something I hadn't even seen, something that drove a hardened old man to despair. The dragging grew louder, closer. A new sound began to mingle with it, the faintest, most eerie laughter, like that of a child not quite right, winding its way up the dark corridor towards us. The laughter twisted through the stale air, a melody composed of innocence lost and malice found. As it edged closer, the shadows in the corridor seemed to pulsate, as if the darkness itself was alive, breathing in tune with that haunting giggle. I felt Tim's grip tighten on my shoulder, his breath ragged against my ear. "Don't look back," he hissed, a tremor of fear threading through his voice. But the corridor was a narrow gullet, with nowhere to hide or run. Ahead, only darkness. Behind, the dragging and giggling drew nearer. The floorboards moaned under someone or something approaching. I could almost count each creak, each scrape. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs, urging me to flee, but my feet betrayed me, roots growing deeper into the decaying wood with every heartbeat. Tim nudged me, a silent command to move. We inched forward, our torchlight feeble against the thick black that enveloped us. The air felt colder now, a chill that gnawed at my bones. I shivered, not just from the cold, but from the dread of what might emerge from the shadows. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the laughter stopped. The silence that followed was oppressive, heavier than the darkness. I strained to hear anything beyond our shallow breaths, but there was nothing. Just when I thought it was over, a soft, sing-song voice whispered right behind us, "Found you." I spun around despite Tim's warning, the torchlight slicing through the dark. There was nothing there but the empty corridor we had just traversed, yet the whisper had felt close enough to brush my ear. Tim pulled at my arm, urging me further down the hallway, his face pale under the beam of his flashlight. "We need to keep moving," he muttered, more to himself than to me. We picked up our pace, the fear of being chased propelling us forward. The walls were lined with old portraits, their faces obscured by years of grime and neglect, watching us with unseen eyes. Each step forward seemed to echo endlessly down the hallway, mocking our attempt to escape. We stopped as we reached a heavy, ornate door. It was partially ajar, groaning softly as if in pain. Tim glanced at me, uncertainty flickering in his eyes for the first time since we entered this forsaken place. "Do we go in?" he whispered. I nodded, unable to find my voice. We pushed the door open, the hinges wailing in protest. The room beyond was bathed in moonlight streaming through a broken window. In the far corner stood a large, antique mirror, its surface foggy with age. The moonlight painted ghostly silhouettes across the room, but it was the reflection in the mirror that caught and held our gazes. For there, in the glass, stood two small children, a boy and a girl. They were watching us, their expressions solemn. I turned quickly to look at the corner where they should have been standing, but there was nothing there. Only the mirror showed their eerie, silent vigil. "How is this possible?" Tim's voice was barely audible, laced with disbelief. I could only shake my head, my throat tight with fear. We turned back to the children in the mirror, but they were no longer alone. Behind them, a taller, shadowy figure was taking shape, details gradually coalescing from the darkness. A broad hat, long coat, eyes like cold stars. I felt a sudden chill, as though this figure was not just in the mirror but somehow with us watching them. The figure raised a hand, and the children vanished from the mirror as if wiped away by an unseen eraser. My breath caught in my throat. Tim grabbed my hand, pulling me back towards the door. "We need to leave now," he urged, panic sharpening his voice. As we stumbled out of the room, the child's laughter resumed, this time mingled with a deeper, humorless chuckle. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, filling the corridor, driving us forward in blind terror. At the end of the hall, the front door loomed, an escape so close yet impossibly far as the laughter swelled to a deafening crescendo. We reached for the door, throwing all our weight against it, desperate for the night air. As the door swung open, spilling us out onto the porch, the night's silence felt unnatural, as if the world was holding its breath. Behind us, the house groaned, a long, sorrowful sound that seemed both a farewell and a threat. We did not look back as we ran into the darkness, away from the house that laughed, away from the eyes that watched from shadows. Yet, even as the distance grew, a shiver of unease remained, a whisper in my mind that mocked the very idea of escape. You can leave the house, but can it leave you?